I'm a psychology undergraduate.
And I'm Julie, I'm a psychology graduate.
And before we start, we'd just like to say that we're both not experts, just psychology enthusiasts and majors. Yeah. In today's video, we have chosen to discuss We Need to Talk About Kevin. This movie is known for its intensity, its complexity, and its uncomfortably vivid portrayal of the aftermath of an atrocity.
Adapted from a book by Leonel Schreiber and directed by Lynn Ramsey, the psychological drama tells the story of a woman named Eva and how she unwillingly gives up her lifestyle and
Her freedom to pursue motherhood. So after giving birth to her firstborn son Kevin, Eva is ambivalent and she finds it difficult to connect with him or to genuinely love him. And as the story unfolds, she slowly realizes her son's problematic behavior extends way further than just mere disobedience, and she eventually finds herself living through the horrifying consequences of a massacre that Kevin commits at his school and his home. And she ends up being in this position where society is ruthless and unforgiving.
There's so much that we can talk about in this movie, but just for today's video we're going to talk about specifically a behavioral disorder known as conduct disorder, its related symptoms, risk factors, and then touch a bit on its trajectory towards antisocial behavior towards the end.
So right from the very beginning of the movie, the viewers get the sense that Kevin is different from other children.
He's incessantly crying and screaming. He doesn't display the usual playfulness and joyfulness that other children typically do, and is even unresponsive when his mother tries to play with him. And children love playing.
Right, yeah.
But Kevin is constantly having this look of malice and bitterness to him.
Right, yeah. Exactly. And we slowly see that this atypical behavior extends much further than this. It seems that Kevin is set to making life a living hell for Eva. And he refuses to comfort her. He's always throwing food in their kitchen fridge. He refuses to be potty trained, and he even destroys her meaningful possessions, which is saying something,
Yeah. And then we see as the movie progresses and Kevin grows older, his malicious behavior becomes increasingly disturbing and even almost unbearable to watch.
Yeah.
He begins storing viruses on CDs and being completely unfazed and unapologetic when his mom catches him masturbating.
Right, and the arrival of Kevin's sister Celia makes him even more disdainful. At this point, he is sadistic and violent, not just causing emotional pain, but also physical pain.
Yeah, and though not explicitly stated, Ramsey implies that Kevin was the one who was to blame for the demise of Celia's pet guinea pig and also for causing her blindness.
Yeah. And of course, his ultimate act of violence, which is murdering his schoolmates, father and sister.
By now, it is obvious that Kevin is far from just a naughty child that will grow out of his bad behavior.
Right.
And the movie never mentions this, but many of his traits that he displays closely resemble a psychological behavioral condition known as conduct disorder.
Yeah, so according to DSM-5, conduct disorder is a repetitive and persistent pattern of behavior in which the basic rights of others or societal norms and rules are violated. So symptoms include aggression to animals and people, destruction of property, deceitfulness or theft, and a violation of rules.
And there's no doubt that Kevin has been physically cruel to people. After all, nothing says cruel more than the act of murder. He also meets the criteria for being physically cruel to animals when it's implied that he killed Celia's pet guinea pig by intentionally placing it down the drain of the sink for his mother to find.
Yeah. Right. Yep. And Kevin also lies to obtain goods or favors. And we see this when Eva throws Kevin on the ground out of frustration, breaking his arm and sending him to the hospital. And obviously from this, Eva feels a lot of guilt. And Kevin knows this, and he sees this as an opportunity to gain the upper hand in their never-ending power play. When Franklin asked him what happened, Kevin lied and said he fell down. And he utilized Eva's guilt to his advantage, forcing her to drive them home instead of going to the store, which initially planned.
Yeah. And the DSM-5 also states that an individual with conduct disorder has limited pro-social emotions if they qualify for at least two of the following symptoms. So lack of remorse or guilt and being callous So that's also displaying a lack of empathy.
Right. And we see this very strongly when Kevin is alarmingly calm and unapologetic when he was supposed to watch out for Celia and he didn't, and that led to her unfortunate incident of becoming blind. And instead of being sorry, he tells his parents that she would just have to suck it up.
Yeah. Not only that, but Kevin also shows shallow and deficient affect, which basically suggests that he is able to switch his emotions on and off quite well.
Right, and in one scene we see that Kevin was opening up to Eva that one time. He was in a more vulnerable state when falling sick, and he relies on her and he allows her to read him a bedtime story. He even cuddles up to her, and this is one of the only occasions where he addresses her as a mom.
Of course, Eva, thinking that their mother-son relationship has taken a turn for the better, offers to help him get dressed the next morning, but Kevin goes back to being his old cold self,
right,
and says that he can dress himself. It's like as if nothing had happened the night before.
Yeah, and I mean it's highly unlikely that the love Kevin portrayed that one night was genuine, because he could so easily turn it off the next day. And so we may conclude that he's simply just toying with her at this point, getting her hopes up, only to be disappointed simply because he knows he can.
So by now we can kind of see that Kevin isn't really capable of true emotions, and this is constantly shown throughout the movie as he clings onto his father Franklin, showing him a completely different side to him than he does his mother. However, we do get a sense that Kevin doesn't genuinely harbour much love or care for his father, as we can see how he becomes very indifferent to him, easily murdering him at the end.
Now that we've covered the symptoms of conduct disorder, let's discuss the potential risk factors.
We think one area worth looking into is the role of biological and developmental factors, or the more nature side of things, if you will.
Yeah. So from the very start, Eva was very unhappy about being pregnant, as this came with moving to the suburbs from New York City, which is a city she loves, and taking a break from a job which she's very passionate about. And all of these changes make Eva feel resentment towards motherhood, because to her it was equivalent to having her freedom taken away from her.
And then Eva slowly becomes more ambivalent and hesitant, not like her past self. And in this powerful scene, the viewers can see a sharp contrast between Eva and the other mothers. While the other mothers are smiling, caressing their bumps, and talking excitedly amongst each other, Eva looks doubtful and out of place.
Right, and in the hospital, after Eva gives birth to Kevin, her overall body language seems to suggest an overall lack of excitement, or joy to meet her baby or to hold him. And the mise-en-scène here is also very telling. The whole scene was just white, and there's this lack of color that adds to the drabness that Eva feels.
Yeah. And this is more apparent when it's contrasted with Celia's birth, where Eva happily cuddles and coos at her. And the hospital seems more alive as well, with brighter colours and flowers on the side.
Right, yeah. And in addition to the initial reluctance that Eva already feels, motherhood does not seem to agree with her. So Kevin never stops crying as a baby, and her attempts at soothing him never results too much. So she becomes extremely helpless, frustrated, and also exhausted.
Yeah. And at this point, it seems like Eva might be showing signs of postpartum depression, which is a common disorder amongst new mothers. And this is caused by the turbulent chemical and emotional changes that comes with pregnancy, and it often results in mothers feeling depressed, hopeless, helpless, and a loss of pleasure.
Right, yeah. And so while we're not stating that Eva's state of mind during and after her pregnancy was to blame for Kevin's conduct disorder, there is definitely a plausible link between the two. According to a child development study by Hay and others, antenatal depression is a huge risk factor to the development of conduct disorder, with adolescents whose mothers were depressed during pregnancy at a fourfold risk for violence. These results are supported by Glover, who explains that this could be linked to fetal exposure to glucocorticoids, which are stress hormones, which directly affects brain tissue development as well as tissue maturation. And of course, as we know of many disorders, the environment can play a very big role in the development of conduct problems and antisocial behavior. In particular, there's a pretty strong evidence that there is the role of family and the relationships within that family that play a role in developing these behaviors in children.
Yeah, For example, parenting style. So Gerald Patterson and his colleagues proposed a theory in 1982 known as the Coercion Theory, which describes how aggressive and antisocial behaviors can develop in children. So essentially, it's a process of mutual reinforcement whereby parents unintentionally reinforce their children's difficult behaviors, which in turn elicits negative parenting, such as lecturing, insulting, and in general expressing negative emotions to their child. And by reacting to their child's difficult behavior, parents are essentially reinforcing that behavior in their child. And this continues on as a cycle until one or the other wins.
Mm-hmm. And we actually see this in the movie. We see like Kevin and Eva are constantly just feeding off each other. Like, there's this one scene where he poops his pants and he waits for her to change his diaper, and then after doing so, he smiles and then poops his diaper again. In response, Eva becomes mad enough to throw him across the room and break his arm, and that in turn leads Kevin to mastermind a series of deceitful and manipulative schemes on his mother, and we see this progress throughout the movie until Kevin wins at the end.
Right. There's also some evidence suggesting that hostile, punitive, and coercive parenting is also associated with conduct problems. So we get many glimpses of this kind of parenting from Eva, like when she grabs and throws him across the wall, breaking his arm, or taking his paint gun and stomping on it until it breaks apart. And even when she tells him harshly that she was happy before little Kevin came along, and now she wakes up every morning wishing she was in France.
Right, and I mean, we're not saying that Eva doesn't try with Kevin. She does express endearment, and she is actually quite affectionate towards him in certain scenes. And in fact, I think she tries her hardest to be a good mother. And while this is apparent, it's also important for a developing child to have regular physical and also emotional care. And we see that Eva doesn't really do this. She goes back and forth between showing him and not showing him love. And, Kevin, being a very intelligent child, probably knows this, and he can tell that it's not genuine. And we think that this could have deepened the wedge that was already in their relationship.
Another risk factor for antisocial behavior depends on the quality of an infant-parent relationship, and research suggests that the quality of this relationship is a powerful predictor of the child's social and emotional outcome for later life.
So issues with infant-parent attachment can contribute to the development of antisocial behavior?
Yeah. So according to the National Collaborating Centre for Mental Health in the UK, that's very possible. Some studies have found that ambivalent and disorganized child attachment patterns are associated with externalizing or problematic behaviors, including conduct problems. A child with disorganized attachment expresses odd or contradictory behavior towards their parent. For example, they may run up to their mother at first, then immediately pull away or even run away from them.
And yeah, we do see Kevin's disorganized attachment to Eva when he was a toddler, like that one scene where she was trying to throw the ball at him and he just wouldn't throw back, and he would just give her this malicious look. But this is one time where he does throw the ball at her, but he quickly changes his mind again, so it's really just on and off.
Yeah. So what are the future implications of this?
So having a history of conduct disorder is actually a risk factor for future antisocial behavior and also the development of antisocial personality disorder. According to DSM-5 and Harvard Health, people with antisocial personality disorder don't abide by society's rules and norms. They can be impulsive, reckless, deceitful, and also intimidating in relationships.
Right. And this attitude leads to a tendency to manipulate and exploit others and potentially take part in criminal activity for which they do not feel guilty or remorseful about. Antisocial personality disorder is also far more common and apparent in men than women. And to be diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder, one has to be at least 18 years old. Although Kevin isn't 18 yet, he has started to show many of the symptoms that resemble this disorder.
Right, yeah. So everything we've discussed, his deceitful and manipulative behavior towards Eva, his non-compliance, as well as his poor relationships with others suggest a potential sociopathic trajectory in his future.
And according to the research, individuals with an earlier onset of clinical features of conduct disorder are more likely to display the most severe symptoms in adolescence and persist in these antisocial tendencies in adulthood.
Yeah, we see many potential clinical features of conduct disorder early on, since Kevin was just an infant. So this includes like his deceitfulness with Eva, as well as his dad, who is, by the way, still clueless or just in denial until the very end. And he manipulates Eva, which starts after she breaks his arm, and he uses that as leverage to get his way.
Right, and then ultimately he ends up committing those grave crimes at his school and at home, for which he clearly shows a complete disregard for others' safety, and he shows no remorse or guilt.
Right, yeah.
So moving away from antisocial personality disorder now, we're going to discuss some interesting film techniques and insights that we have gathered from the movie.
So if you've watched the movie from start to end, you'll notice that the movie jumps back and forth between past and present. And in some parts of the movie, they actually just like blend together, and you can't really tell them apart. It just goes to show how Eva's current life is negatively impacted by the events of her past and by Kevin's actions, and she just can't escape it.
Yeah. And the repetitive scenes of Eva trying to scrub off the red paint as well, that also adds to it. And no matter how much she scrubs, the paint just won't go away.
Right.
And that's quite symbolic of how no matter how much she tries to get rid of her past, it will always be there to haunt her.
Yeah, and it really just goes to show how society as a whole reacts not only to Kevin but also to Eva. And there are recurring scenes in the movie of the community just condemning, ridiculing, or just fearing Eva because of Kevin's actions. And this is very true to reality, where family members or relatives of those with conduct disorder or antisocial personality disorder will have to suffer the consequences of actions committed by them.
Right. And perhaps the movie is also trying to make a statement about the way society at the time, or even currently, views mental health, that there is some type of stigma associated with it. So, I mean, we see in the movie that the majority of the community seems to be entirely convinced that Kevin is inherently evil after committing murder, and they're unforgiving about that. And they don't talk about why he did what he did, what's going on with him mentally, or even give Eva a chance to talk about him. They just send him straight to prison and condemn Eva.
Right, that's true. And thinking back at it now, like the movie never actually mentions any psychological terms. Like there was no mention of conduct disorder or antisocial behaviors, and there was very little use of dialogue as well.
And ironically, the movie's called We Need to Talk About Kevin.
Right.
We don't really do so.
Yeah, exactly. That's so true. So the treatment also really isn't sought out in the movie, and I feel like there were many opportunities for intervention, such as seeking professional help early on, or even just rehabilitation in prison. So I mean, Eva does take Kevin to the doctor when he was younger because she thinks that he might have had some hearing problems, and after not responding to her, but he checked out fine, and that's all that's really done. Yeah.
Right. We do see Eva trying on several occasions to talk to her husband as well about Kevin's problematic behaviors, but she's constantly rejected by him each time. We sense like his disbelief and denial about the matter, and we see Eva struggle because it seems like no one really notices or cares.
Right, yeah, and eventually her husband thinks that Eva was the one who needed to see someone. And just the topic of Kevin itself almost tears their marriage apart.
Right.
Yeah. So, how accurate was the movie? We need to talk about Kevin in depicting mental health.
Right. Well, I think the movie is quite subtle in how it represents concepts of mental health and how society views mental health as well. I mean, we are viewing everything from the perspective of Eva, so we never actually get to see the full picture of Kevin's actions and his thoughts and things like that.
And while Kevin does exhibit like traits that matches with the symptoms of conduct disorder, many scenes are actually implicit rather than explicit. Like the guinea pig incident, and when Celia went blind because of the chemicals, we never actually see Kevin doing it. And many of the scenes in the movie actually just leave us wondering, and that makes it so much more suspenseful.
Right?
Yeah.
The movie is definitely very confronting for its audience, but as a whole, I think the movie does quite a good job at encapsulating many of the traditional symptoms of conduct disorder, and then also the potential development of antisocial personality disorder, but also how society approaches these issues.
I agree. And so I guess in a way, the movie's almost making a statement, getting us to think, how do we respond and treat mental health?
And I guess we can both agree, or all of us can agree, that we can do this by first talking about it.
Yeah. So that's all for today's video.
We hope that it's been insightful and that you've learned a little bit more about conduct disorder and antisocial personality disorder.
Please like and subscribe if you thought it was a good video.
And what movie should we do next? Please feel free to leave a comment down below.
Until next time.
Bye!